go or the YouTube pages and you can view the entire program. As a matter of fact, you will be able to pull up past programs to see what has happened. We have been having an interesting discussion, and I was answering the question that Mr. Green put forward just moments ago in relation to when your loved one dies at the hospital, they are unable to make contact with you, and however, they, the human remains was sent to another funeral home, which is not the government contracted funeral home. Now, as I was explaining, the proper procedure to follow is that as long as the hospital does not have an engagement or a contract with another funeral home, they ought to call the government contracted funeral home for that area. Now, if they should choose to call somebody else or another entity because maybe it's closer, maybe they are familiar with the person, whatever reasons there are, all costs up to the time of the transfer of human remains to your funeral home of choice, all costs must be borne by the hospital. You have a legal case. And tell everybody I say that you have a legal case because the hospital cannot just make a decision as to where your family goes like that without your engagement out of the remit or the purview that it is the government contracted funeral home for the area that has been engaged. And yes, I know we have had cases where this has happened, and that I say is part of the reason why we are giving you the information now, because ignorance is no excuse, and now we are giving you the information that you may have it, you are armed with it, and you may know how to proceed going forward.
Listeners, we are here to arm you with information. As I have said before, together we can make the industry better. And we are here to protect the integrity of the funeral industry. I want you to know that in this industry, it is not just anything goes.
Right.
Because some people might believe that because, you have a debt and you are going through this grieving process, anything goes. No, there are procedures. There are guidelines to be followed, right? And I've heard the cry of many family. I have seen it. I've seen the tears, right? I feel their pain after their loved one have been sent to a funeral home that is not a contracted government funeral home. Then the loved one have to foot that expense. Not only do they have to foot the expense, but a lengthy time for the release.
Right.
Because they are saying that they have to get proper documentation from the hospital, and they want to know which family is responsible, all of those things. And it takes times. And they are charging by the day.
All right. And that brings me to the point, Mr. Green, where I want to say to the listeners that I have indicated to them some time ago that on this program, in a matter of weeks, we will be having the information directly from the Ministry of Health. So we'll be able to say to you, we'll be going through the document to say to you which funeral home is contracted for what parish or what areas, and for all public hospital or public facilities, which funeral home is contracted to do storage for those public entities, because we are dealing with public entities. The fact is, public entities is being staffed by and paid for by the public purse. So we are the ones who pay for service delivery. And I believe that if we are the ones paying for service delivery, then the services that we are paying for should be of such that it makes our lives easier. It can't be that in a situation such as this, you're going through grief, and an entity that is supposed to help to make your grief easier is actually helping to make the grief more. And so for that reason, friends, as I indicated, we will be having the information, so you will know which funeral home goes with which hospital or which jurisdiction. And in the event that some hospitals do not have a contracted funeral home, then you know automatically then that this is the funeral home within this parish or within this part of the parish that you are to go to. And so in cases where discrepancies like this happen, you will know the natural process of recourse that you will need to take.
And I also want to, inform our listeners that I really want you to pay attention to the program because we are giving you information that can make things easier and much smoother for you. And I want to also remind you that sometimes you might not be the person who is upfront
Right.
to make a decision at the moment, but you are the one who is totally responsible,
Right.
right? You are the one who's spending the money,
Yes.
right? But the caregiver, right, might left with certain responsibility. No funeral home can just go to an hospital and remove your loved one without permission be given.
It is not
So
supposed to
you,
happen.
it's not supposed to happen.
Yes.
You might not in agreement with the choice that the next of kin make, right? Or the person that is responsible up until that point make.
Right.
So although you might not agree with that decision, if your loved one has already been moved to that facility, then it's going to occur charges.
It's going to incur charges.
It's going to so you're going to have to pay for the time that your loved one is there. So I have seen it happen all the time where people bash the funeral home, believe that they wasn't a part of the agreement.
Right.
So they need to get back their loved one. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
There's process.
So the fact is, before you come down on the hospital to say the hospital did this or that, as I said a few minutes ago in one of my answers, you need to first ascertain as to whether or not permission was given by somebody, a next of kin, a caregiver, whomever. Ensure that you ascertain that permission was not given, because you might be fighting a losing cause. It just may be that somebody else had given the permission, and it could be proven. It can be proven that somebody else who is a legal relative has given the permission. And so before you get at the hospital or get at the funeral home, ensure that at least you cross this hurdle, because naturally nobody does a service, and in this case services such as these, without a cost, because it costs to provide the service and somebody must pay that cost. It's just a matter of who will be paying the cost, and that's why we are taking the time to say to you, ascertain the natural process, or find out the natural progression of things as to whether the hospital acted on, or somebody at the hospital acted on their own, or really there was somebody else from your side who had indicated to them that yes, go ahead. In situations where this has happened, naturally the hospital will be in the right, because they acted within the remits of the legality of everything else. And so you then will be left to make the decision as to whether or not you really are going to transfer your relative to where you want, or you're going to regulate things as are.
Yeah, we are running out of time. But after that, Sir Mark, what happened? What next? After the death, your loved one has been moved to that funeral provider. Then what you need to do next? As you know that you can't just bury like that,
Right.
right? Then there is a very important document that you need to have in your possession before you go further, is the burial order.
Or what we call in Jamaica the pink paper.
The pi-
On
the
the
pink
document
paper.
itself, it is called the provisional cause of death.
Provisional cause
We
of
call it the burial order, or the pink
Right.
paper.
right.
And I often say the holder of the pink paper is the powerful person,
Power.
because nobody that you go to will engage you without
Without that piece of document.
that piece of
Yeah,
document.
so the pink paper, it is commonly said the pink paper.
pink paper,
That's the paper that has the power.
right?
Right? You can't do nothing without that pink paper. Right? You cannot to get even a burial spot. You have to have that pink paper in hand to take to the parish council
Yes.
for them to listen to you. Right? So they will not listen to you without that pink paper. And it is not a document that is readily given upon the time of death.
No, it has
Right.
to be to the legal next of kin.
Right. And the doctor have to go through the person filed and, approve of certain things. So it takes a little time. So, it's a process.
And like I said to you on Thursday, listeners, it is important that every citizen in Jamaica at least has two government issued, let me go back, at least one government issued identification. And what I say government issued, I'm talking about either a passport, a Jamaican passport, a Jamaican driver's license, or the national ID. Please note that the national ID is not only used for voting. So even if you don't intend to vote, it is important that you have a national identification, because there is no service provider that is going to really transact business with you and you don't have a government issued ID and a TRN. If you are going to be listed on the documents of a relative at the hospital as next of kin, ensure that you at least have a TRN and a government issued ID, because in the event, I know that is not something that we plan for, but the reality is it just may happen. And in the event that death happens, you want the process to be a seamless process. And a part of making the process a seamless process is to ensure that you have the requisite documents that will be needed. The ID, TRN, both yours and for your relative. And as let me remind you, for your aged relatives who may have what we call the age paper, that piece of paper, try to get an updated birth certificate for them. Friends, we are out of time. We thank you so much. We know you have choices, and we thank you so much for having been here with us today. We'll be here again Thursday morning, same time, 11:30 to 12 o'clock. The program is Final Decision. I'm, of course, your host, Mark Maitland, from the Garden of Paradise Funeral Home. And with me is
Errol Green from Exodus Funeral Home.
And just remember, it will get better.
Last forever. And if you trust in the Lord, your nights will turn to day. Just remember, it will get better.
This is KLAS FM, owned and operated by Omega.